Alright, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, anyone and everyone in between, let's all rant for a little bit. What do DMs do that you absolutely hate? Us D&D players can never really get enough. Whether you play 3 times a week or once a month, part of you always craves more. We get our fix however we can, by watching short stories online, D&D live streams, Baldur's Gate. Well, allow me to offer you something new. The best available follows a party of new adventurers trying to make a name for themselves in hopes of being sponsored in a competition. Waterdeep's Festival of Heroes, which sees the chosen parties delving into the depths of Undermountain, risking life and limb to suppress the evils and monsters below to protect the city above. The Dungeon of the Mad Mage is filled with danger, treasure, glory, and mysteries yet to be revealed. Come watch the journey from humble beginnings into heroic legend as we adapt a campaign years in the making into an illustrated web series with art from Doodle Poodle, author of Tales from the Tables. We pride ourselves in converting hours-long sessions into smoothly paced episode with limited animation, music, blood, sweat, and tears. Get in on the ground floor of something great and join the Forever DMs table today. Link in the description. Nerfing Classes to the ground just because they don't understand the reasoning behind how that class was built in the first place. A classic example is when one DM nerfed my rogue to the point where I could only sneak attack once per battle. I showed him my damage output without sneak attack, but he said, "You picked a class that doesn't deal damage. It isn't my fault, duh." No, motherfucker! It is your fault. You nerfed him so he can't do damage. I left after showing him that I did 1/5 of the damage of literally everyone else, and he didn't care. Also, this didn't come up during session 0. He said he might change things based on the party makeup and how things turned out, and the first couple of sessions were pretty good. Then, he showed up with a list of changes to classes, and yeah, I didn't even play that session. I left after showing him the math. Now, I found out that it only lasted 2 sessions after that before everyone else quit. He made drastic changes to a lot of classes, and it just didn't make sense. For example, barbarians had to roll 1d20 when they raged, and if they got a 1, they would attack anyone, or fireball and lightning bolt being 5th and 6th level spells. Not explaining very necessary information. I can be guilty of this sometimes because I get overwhelmed and forget to mention things, which is normal. But the most egregious example I can think of is when I stated that my character threw a short quip at an enemy before casting a spell, only to be told that the spell failed because I was in an area of silence. Also, fumble tables. Never use fumbles! They are awful and sometimes completely debilitating. I feel like a lot of DMs forget to use the society they have built to handle problematic player behavior. I see a lot of people complain in various communities about things like, "My players are murder hobos. What do I do?" Well, have the guards arrest them. Make them stand trial, put a bounty on their heads. There are so many realistic ways to handle these things. If a player is dumb enough to shit-talk the captain of the guard, have them appropriately punished by the guards. If they blow up an orphanage, put a massive bounty on their heads. Give in-game consequences to their in-game actions. That said, I also get frustrated when DMs punish players for clever ideas. If your players build a crazy cool structure out of bed linens and furniture to escape out of a tower window, sure, make them roll checks as they go down. But don't outright punish them for finding a smart way to avoid the big bad evil guy. DMPCs, which is a Dungeon Master player character. I once was in a game where we had 3 NPCs, each with 2 flame tongues, multi-attack 2 to 4 each turn, and healing powers. It made me feel so useless. I was the party cleric, because we thought about party composition, but with NPCs healing us all the time, what's the point? The party tank also felt useless, only dealing up to 4d6 damage a turn, while the NPCs, wink wink, dealt up to 12d6 a turn. Our crowd control wizard also felt bad because he chose a bunch of fire spells, and we were fighting a devil, so they were all doing half damage. Which might have been fine, except the NPCs, flame tongues, ignored resistance to fire. Also, DMs constantly healing the party or giving everyone plot armor. The PCs signed up to be adventurers. They know the risks involved. If adventuring was easy, everybody would do it. Don't try to keep me alive with your DM PCs who seem to have unlimited spell slots. Just let me die! I made my bed! Let me lay in it! Giving a player an NPC for an adventure with limited spell slots is fine, especially if you let a player run it in combat. Pro tip, by the way, let players run NPCs in combat. It helps breed DMs, which eventually allows more people to play TTRPGs. Da-da-da! Also, taking forever to introduce players. D&D is about a story, sure, but it's definitely not about making a player wait for an entire session. Or worse, 5 sessions to play. Just put somebody in the dungeon, create a portal that opens, drop in the PC, and close it. Make a PC one of the bandits who decided to turn, or a mind-controlled person whom the party frees. I don't care, just don't make the player wait more than an hour to play. The one exception is in the middle of a long combat. The "do you want to do anything?" question, where there is literally nothing to stimulate an answer. Because railroading bad. I'd rather be railroaded, that's what she said, than waste time in silence because there is nothing to interact with. DMs with a dice rolling fetish. I don't think a level 14 elf rogue needs to roll to cut a rope with a dagger outside of combat, or roll acrobatics to vault over a 60 centimeter tall wall. Continuous dice rolls ruin the flow of role-playing. That kind of DM was one of the reasons I switched to PBTA games and other dice-light systems when I was starting out with RPGs. I've just gotten back into D&D because I found a DM who values role-playing and story building over superfluous rolls. Ruling that a nat 1 on skill checks is a thing. God, it's the worst. It makes me not want to roll skills at all. Are you telling me that a fighter with a passive athletics of 22 just suddenly loses all their strength because of bad luck? The whole point, in my mind, is that the lowest they could roll is a 12, showing that even on their worst day, they are still better than the average person on an average day. This also buffs rogues by proxy, since they can't roll lower than a 10 on skills with proficiency after they get reliable talent. And here's the second one, not being strict about what spells can and cannot do. Now, obviously, if you like that stuff and your players are on board, go for it, but my God, read your damn spells and use material components. It makes them way more balanced, but not perfect by any means, but better. I've had an Adventurers League DM ignore clarifying questions in the interest of time. For those who don't know, AL is an organized plaything. Here's an example. How is the Rainbow Force barrier arranged? You said 20-foot radius. Are we talking spherical or cylindrical? As Fighter crosses through that door, you see the massive beast in its containment field. You know this is why you were sent here. Sorcerer, what are you doing? Well, I'm going to get within 20 feet on top. You can't do that. It's a cylinder. Well, I asked earlier about that. I had another one who was the worst kind of min-maxer when he played, and whose characters were all rich, arrogant clerics. Oh, God. After the AL adventure was done and we were going through loot, he tried to say that I couldn't use a certain magic item because I was a rogue and didn't meet the attunement requirements. I told him I was a thief rogue, so yes, I could. He insisted that I couldn't and wouldn't leave me alone, eventually saying, "Yeah, well, not at my table, pal." Saying something like, "I'll let you this time, but let's say no this time until I've had the chance to double check that mechanic." And then actually checking it's a perfectly valid answer, especially if you're playing things more rules as written. Oh, and he also did an In interest of time, we'll say that you win the battle mid-combat. Repeatedly. If you're going to alter a fight due to time, knock some of its health down and don't announce it. For fuck's sake, don't just say, okay, you won, moving on, or worse, we've ran out of time tonight, so you lose. It was like, why even try participating if you're just going to auto-win, or in this case, auto-fail us? TLDR, not listening to clarifying questions, trying to correct someone without receipts, and making a victory condition feel empty. One of my biggest pet peeves is locking mandatory information behind skill checks, especially if the party is lacking in the relevant skill. You should never rely on the party being able to meet a certain DC, or else. You can set the DC to 5, and I guarantee you, that'll be the moment everybody rolls a nat 1. I've seen it happen. Obviously, you should be calling for skill checks outside of combat. A history roll to get lore is great. Please give characters with good skills chances to shine. But if you know that the plot simply cannot progress if the PCs don't find a particular clue or discover a specific piece of information, then you cannot lock that clue or info behind a skill check. Failure should generally move the story forward in an unexpected direction, not halt the story in its tracks until the dice cooperate again. A past DM of mine had a bad habit of this, and on one memorable occasion we spent about, 45 minutes in real life stuck in the same room, not sure what to do because none of us rolled better than a 10 on the check to find out what the plot was. It was maddening. The DM wound up sending a DM PC to rescue us and tell us what we were meant to do because we'd all failed the skill check and spent a lot of in-character time trying to find a way around it. Oh, by the way, there wasn't one. The DM's thought was, someone has to be able to roll better than a 10, right? We faced some serious in-universe consequences for that. I later asked the DM what we could have done better, if there was an alternative way we didn't think of, and he said, nope. We just had to pass the check, apparently. One check was completely make or break to progress the whole story, and the DM was frustrated afterward because he'd been counting on one of us succeeding dramatically to save the day. Seriously, just don't do that. If there's only one way the party can get needed information to move the story forward, just let them find it. Maybe put in a puzzle or some interactive steps, but never hinge the whole thing on one roll. But do give them bonus credit if they can find an alternative way, but never rely on the party successfully doing one very specific thing. In the critical moment, they won't. On a related note, by the way, to try to avoid gotchas, I have a long, amusing, and annoying story behind this one, but TLDR, not everyone shares your assumed reality. Nobody reasonable leaves hotel windows unlocked with open shades. If the players make a choice that seems obviously foolish based on information you know their characters know, double check with them about it. The player might be making a choice, but it's just as likely that there was a genuine misunderstanding. Make sure they didn't miss something in your descriptions. The characters know what their environment looks like, but the players only know what you tell them and what they remember. And sometimes it's easy to miss details by mistake. Don't penalize the party for failing to lock windows if the players didn't realize the room had windows in it. Nobody likes that. Be thorough and be communicative. Also, don't introduce game-changing rules or rulings midway through a game without clearing it with the party first. I had a DM who watched Fantasy High and decided he wanted to add critical fumbles halfway through the campaign without warning, and no one knew until he made the Warlock EB, our poor cleric, out of nowhere. EB means Eldritch Blast. It wasn't cool, by the way. The same DM also added new crafting systems, downtime mechanics, and a few other things. Also halfway through the game, and unexpectedly, some of them really threw us for a loop and interfered with players' plans and expectations. A lot of these had to be negotiated with the DM. He was always really excited to do cool stuff, a great dedicated guy with wonderful stories to tell, but he didn't always realize the effects his shiny ideas would have on players. and by consequence, he consistently forgot to warn us. This got very frustrating. If you get a shiny idea, think about it, maybe give it a try, but check in with your players first. They should never learn about a new rule by experiencing it. Tell them the new rule you want to apply in advance. If it significantly changes any mechanics for their characters, give them a chance to react and prepare, and maybe tweak their character decisions if they really don't like the effects. The same way they'd presumably prepare or react if you'd introduced those rules in Session 0. Hey everybody, Brian Von VA checking in after the vid. Make sure to leave a like, subscribe, ring that bell, and of course, if you want to help us keep the lights on, it would be a great favor if you just hit that membership button. You don't have to, but if you do, you get early access to videos, sometimes an outtake or two, and mine are kind of derpy every so often. Maybe more, we don't know. We're working on that. But until then, what do DMs do that you hate? Leave it in the comments below. We love you all. Be safe. See you next time.